Hi, everyone. My name is Albert, one of the co-founders of VectorShift. Today, we're going to build a conditional chatbot using the VectorShift no-code builder. Now, just as a quick review, there are three types of pipelines of VectorShift. There are standard pipelines, which are mappings between inputs and outputs. We're going to use that today. Inputs, data coming in like a question, and output, say a user response coming out the other end. There's also triggers, which is we want to run a workflow when something happens, say when a new email comes in. And then we have conversational pipelines as well, which you define what happens at each step in the conversation. Let's go ahead and click standard. This populates an input on the screen. Now, this is kind of a hypothetical example, but what if I'm trying to build a chatbot that leverages a knowledge base, right? But also can use the CSV query reader, and depending on what the question is, whether it's a question that should be routed to a tabular data source like the CSV query reader, or if it's a general type question which should be routed to the knowledge base, we need to separate out that conditional logic. So how do we do this? So first, we need to classify the user question using an LLM. Let's go ahead and drag out an OpenAI LLM. We could use something pretty cheap like GPT-4o Mini for this use case. And let's just write, you are an expert question classifier. Your job is to classify the question into one of two camps, CSV or general. Let's just say the CSV is like a CSV about pricing. If it's a question related to pricing, respond with CSV. If it's a question that is not about pricing, let's just say all other scenarios, respond with general. So this LLM would really only respond with one or two things. One is CSV or general. And then we could use a conditional node to route this question to different parts of the pipeline accordingly. Let's go ahead and link the input node, which is in this case the question coming in, to this OpenAI node. You do that using variables in VectorShift. You can access variables using double curly braces. There's two steps to making a variable. One is clicking the node, and the second is to select the output field within the node. The input node only has one output field, which is just the raw text coming from the input node. So it's input_.text, which is the variable coming from this input node. All right, let's go ahead and now let's use the condition node. And now let's create different paths based on what type of question this is. So let's go ahead and connect this. And let's just say if OpenAI _0 equals CSV, we want to go under path 0. If it's OpenAI _.response 0 equals general, we want to go under path 1. So now we could actually create the different pipelines that start from these different paths. So let's go ahead and handle the knowledge base path first. This is basically a simple kind of knowledge assistant type pipeline. Basically, we need to connect the path 1 to the knowledge base reader, but then we need to use the input, right, which is the raw question, right? And let's go ahead and create a knowledge base based off of this. Let's just pretend this is a VectorShift chat assistant. And let's go back to the pipeline. So let's go ahead and review what's happening here. So if the question is classified as a general question, we're going to route it to path 1. We're going to connect path 1 to knowledge bases. When a node is connected to two paths, both paths have to be true for it to run. So first, it has to be path 1 has to be identified as correct. Then input 0 would already have been run in this case. Then it will pass input _0, which is the question, to this knowledge base. Now let's go ahead and use an LLM to now answer the question based on context and then spit out the output. Let's just say answer the question based on context. And the question is coming from the input node, and the context is coming from the knowledge base. All right. So we have this part of the pipeline done. Let's go ahead and deal with path _0. So in this case, we can use the CSV query agent, right, which is really good at handling CSVs. Let's just pretend, I have just this e-commerce data set. It's actually not related to VectorShift, but we'll just use this for demonstration purposes. So the same deal here. We want to connect path 0 to CSV query agent. So to only trigger this path if OpenAI response equals CSV, and then we want to pass the question also into the search query if that's the case. All right, so what the CSV query agent does is it actually is able to recursively call itself like an agent to be able to make autonomous decisions, to be able to answer questions based on a CSV. All right, so the final thing we have to do, we have to actually use the merge node to merge the different paths into one. Basically what this does is because a chatbot has only one output, it can only have one input and one output, we have to combine these two paths and use a function to pick which one to use, and we're going to use the pick first function, like whichever of these branches finish first, we want to use that and pass it forward. So the path 1 is coming from the CSV query reader, and then the path 2 is coming from the OpenAI one node. All right, let's go ahead and connect an output to this now. Now, let's go ahead and run this pipeline now. So if I ask the question like, what is VectorShift? Right, we can look at the OpenAI 0 node. We can see that it's classified it under general. So it should have now followed path 1. And you can see that it's actually going to path 1. The CSV query reader is never called, right? We're using the knowledge base node and the LM node and the merge node and the output node. It's following this path to produce this output over here. All right, let's go ahead and try another question. Let's say like, what is the price of a black bag? And run it. And then you can see that the OpenAI _0 node has classified the question under CSV, which means it's identified it as a price-related question. Then the condition node routes it to path 0, and then it's triggered the CSV query agent, which produces the response. We merge the paths together. This path is never run. We're picking the first that finishes, which is the CSV query agent, and then we're producing the output that the bag is $140. Amazing. Just a quick review of how to deploy this. Just go ahead and press deploy. Go to export, chatbot. Just say it's VectorShift agent. When you create the chatbot, you can then customize this here. Click export. You can embed this in your website or open it up in a link over here to pass to your team or your customers. Hopefully this was helpful. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.